And we're talking about the New Orleans Saints. They have completed filling out their offensive and defensive coordinators as they have hired Doug Nussmeier as their OC. Nussmeier has worked alongside new Saints head coach Kellen Moore at a number of stops, most recently in Philly, where he served as quarterbacks coach for Jalen Hurts and the Super Bowl champion Eagles. Nussmeier was the quarterbacks coach during Moore's stint as OC for the Dallas Cowboys from 2019 to 2022, and then the Chargers in 2023. Nussmeier is a former quarterback himself. He has ties to the area. The Saints drafted him in the 4th round in 1994, and he spent 4 seasons there in New Orleans. And then a day later, the Saints would hire former Los Angeles Chargers head coach Brandon Staley as their defensive coordinator. Staley was the Chargers head coach from 21 to 23, and he hired Moore to be his OC in his final year. Staley also spent the 2024 season as the San Francisco 49ers assistant head coach. But prior to his stint, and this is going to, hit home for Elijah, prior to his stint with the Chargers, he was the Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator in 2020, where the Rams led the league in scoring defense and total defense in that season. So, Elijah, the Saints get their guys. Not a huge shock in the mix because their names were, a part of that, of who they potentially thought would be the coordinators. But how do you feel about the hires? And I want to hear your thoughts on what you think about Brandon Staley being in the mix as well. You got your mic muted, bro.
So I think the offensive hire. I think the offensive hires was that's for granted. I think when offensive coaches usually take jobs, they take somebody that's familiar with the system that they want to run, and they grab them and help them implement the game plan for the week. I mean, if you look at it, D'Amico Ryans when he went from the defensive coordinator from San Francisco to the head coach for the Texans, he took offensive guy on the staff before he fired him this year, and then with Liam Cohen did the same thing with Jacksonville. He had somebody who he had on his staff when he was in LA. Um, and took him with him. So that's normal. And I think Doug will have great. What I think will be great for that, the Saints part of it is talent and development because I think Doug, who I'm pretty sure is working with his son Garrett, um, can help develop some talent out there in New Orleans, especially at the quarterback position, which everybody knows that's what is most needed for the New Orleans Saints. That's not a secret. It is what it is. They need some quarterback play, and I think Doug can probably help develop that um, if they don't tank and get his son. But now for Brandon Staley, New Orleans, you're in trouble. I'm not gonna lie, you're in trouble. I don't get me wrong, Brandon Staley. I think is probably a good guy. He comes to work on time, clocks in, checks in with his players. But let's be honest with you, the 2020 year when the Rams had that scoring defense, his defense system really worked because he had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. I mean, you had one guy who could shut down one side of the field because Jalen Ramsey was still in his prime, and then you had Aaron Donald who just in that year was taking 2 to 3 offensive linemen. One play he did take 4. I remember that. Took 2 or 3 guys offensive linemen, and now everybody else get one-on-ones. As you can see, when he went to the Chargers, he had Joey Bosa, he had Khalil Mack, he had Derwin James, he had Asante Samuel Jr. I mean, the list could still go on. What he had out there in the Chargers, and they gave up. I remember they gave up like 70 to the Raiders or 60 to the
They
Raiders.
gave up 63. That the 63-point loss or the 63 points that they gave up, that's ultimately after that game is when he got fired. And like when you looking at numbers, after he left the Rams after that one season, his defense is 30th, 22nd, 21st. And then last year with the 49ers, I know he wasn't the DC, but they were 29th in total defense. So his track record as of recent hasn't been the best. But keep going.
Yeah, man. So like that, it's horrible. It's horrible. But you know what though? You gotta start somewhere. And people don't understand. Brandon Staley was actually on that San Francisco team last year. He was the defensive specialist or whatever that even was. So and their defense wasn't even good last year. So what I'm saying is, I know you're going off the track record of what he did in the past, what he did in 2020 with the Rams, but I really want y'all to pay attention to what he did after he left the Rams and went to the Chargers and then the 49ers. The defense has never been the same. Now, with that being said, um, if 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 Kellen Moore, who's an offensive guy, who I don't know if he's an all-around coach, if he have some game plans that can help Brandon Staley and get him out some of that stupid schemes that he have, then maybe it could work. But Brandon Staley hire is not a great hire. And I'm saying that in the sense of the Saints kind of rushed this one. And I wish they would have looked around the league just a little bit more to see what they could find. Because if you want to turn things around defensively and you want somebody that's young and energetic that's coming in the room, I wouldn't have grabbed Brandon. I would have grabbed probably somebody else. So that's what I got to say about that.
Man, you going hard on your former defensive coordinator, man. You ain't taking no prisoners, bro. You ain't cutting them no slack.
Nah.
Listen, man. For me, I love Doug Nussmeier coming in, because when you're implementing a new offense, which Kellen Moore has been on record in his first press conference, he said that he will call plays. Somebody asked him that question, and he kind of said it like, "Yeah, I'm gonna call them plays." Who you thought? But with Doug Nussmeier being on the staff, it's going to give him a sense of somebody that he's familiar with. Obviously him being on the staff with the Cowboys, and then also there where Brandon Staley was a part of the mix too. So all of those guys are comfortable with each other. They know what each other's work ethic is like. They know the amount of time that they put in. To me, I also think that Doug Nussmeier being in the building is a sense that, like Elijah mentioned, that development will happen, and I think he will end up developing his son. I think the Saints will give Derek Carr one more year. They're going to ride it out. They're going to see what happens with him. And if he don't get the answers that they're looking for, they're going to find every possible way to get as high up as they can for Garrett. Because if Garrett, because we was at the Super Bowl, and after this is over now, but we went inside and got there near the 100 levels, and we saw Garrett, and that's the first thing I said is, man, he looking real lean. He didn't trim down. He looking stout. He ready to go and lead the Tigers. So what we've seen in the past few years of LSU quarterbacks in year twos, Joe Burrow, Heisman Trophy winner. Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. Hey, if Garrett Nussmeier wins the Heisman Trophy and the Saints don't have another good year, fully expect for Doug Nussmeier to nudge the shoulder of Kellen Moore and say, go get my boy. Let's make magic happen in the dome. So I love that for Doug Nussmeier, mainly because he will now have an opportunity to be in position that if the Saints do have success, he can go and get himself a head coaching job if that's what he decides to do for his career. Now, defensively, I saw Brandon Staley's name, and I started doing research because, I knew of the way that he coached the Rams, and I started looking at the scheme that he plays, and they started talking about this. He likes to play a gap and a half, and I'm looking at the videos, and I'm like, bro, this is so odd, because just football 101 or quick breakdown, whatever. Defensively in schemes, everybody normally has a one gap assignment. So if I'm a defensive tackle, I'm lined up on the right hand side of the center, whatever. If I'm a nose, I have that gap that I'm right there in, unless we call a stunt or twist or anything like that. I have that one gap. So if we're in run defense, right, and the running back runs through my hole, I'm supposed to plug the gap or I'm supposed to make the tackle. But in Brandon Staley's defense, which he likes to play with a 3-man front, they are not two gapping, meaning that they're holding their lineman up and then playing either side. Instead, they're being aggressive and they're holding the gap where they're lined up at. And then if the back cuts away, they're shedding and trying to make the play in the hole. The whole purpose of that is to make it hard for offensive linemen that if they're working double teams in different schemes and they're trying to work up to the second level, it makes it harder for them to come off of a double team and work up to the second level. So essentially, it's designed for your 3 guys up front to be dudes, and then your safeties and inside linebackers to come and make the plays, 1-2 yards up the field. A lot of the plays that were happening for the Rams during the year were not a lot of TFLs, unless the defensive line just penetrated and got in the backfield and made the play. It was mostly like short gains, 1 to 2 yards. And in today's NFL, for some reason, 2-3 yard gains are a bad thing. So if they're not doing that, they're gonna stop running the football, right? I don't know how this will work with the Saints personnel because for the longest, they have been a 4-3 base type of defense for the past couple of years under Dennis Allen. I think the past 9 with him being there. So now you're asking these guys to not only learn a different scheme, which that's nothing new to the NFL, but we gonna play you different. So now a guy like Cam Jordan, instead of playing a 5 tech, is going to be more of a 4-eye, which means that instead of lining up outside of the offensive tackle, he'll be more inside of him. And again, if it's going off of Brandon Staley's philosophy, he's going to be playing a gap and a half. So to a guy that's been in the NFL for as long as Cam Jordan has and has been playing it a certain type of way, I'm not saying he can't do it. I believe he can, but it's going to be some growing pains and adjustments. And I don't know how much time the Saints will have to get it figured out before they're not in the position that they want to be in terms of being a playoff team. So I don't know. It is to be seen. I do also believe that because Brandon Staley is a 3-4 guy, especially if they do play a 3-4 defense, they have to go get Mason Graham and plug him in. Because I done watched enough tape on that boy from Michigan. he the one. And you need guys that are strong enough to hold up against double teams and against their linemen and to be able to shed blocks and play a gap and a half over. So Elijah doesn't like it. I'm very, very leery about the Staley hire. I like Doug Nussmeier being in the house. Ultimately, Kellen Moore went and got guys that he would be comfortable with. And that is what is the main thing that he's going to want in order to be able to build out his philosophy and get guys in the building to teach the way that he wants the New Orleans Saints organization to be ran. So we'll see, man.
I gotta ask you though. So we talk about Doug, talk about Doug development, right? And I know you said David Carr. I mean, if the Saints don't tank, I mean lose enough games to go get Garrett Nussmeier, would you rather see him try to develop Spencer Rattler throughout the year, or would you rather see Derek Carr there again?
I think developing Spencer Rattler could be the move as well. But I just know that typically when new coaches come in, they want to go get their guys. Like there's no knock to anybody that's on the staff or already on the team. They just typically want their own guys because they can implement it. Because, like I was mentioning with Cam Jordan been under Dennis Allen the past 9-10 years. He's been playing the defense a certain way, so he already comfortable. Now you finna tell him potentially, bro, you're gonna have to play the defensive end position completely different than what you've played in the last half of your career. I mean, versus if you go and draft somebody and you tell them, this is how I want you to play my defense. That's the only way they know how to play it in the NFL. So it's kind of the same thing. Even though Spencer Rattler is still very young in the league, so he's still very impressionable. But for Derek Carr, I mean, he's felt his way about the way that he plays his whole career, so he ain't gonna want to change too much. So that's why I believe it'll be Garrett in the building with the New Orleans Saints in the next year. I fully believe that. Y'all can book it, and you heard it here first here on the Fitz Take podcast. So we'll see what happens there with the New Orleans Saints.